This is a Cycling Over 60 podcast, Season 2, Episode 23, Anita's Incredible Perseverance, and I'm your host, Tom Butler. I have started out this year with a fizzle. I've been sick, so I haven't been out this week at all. That means when tomorrow comes, I will need to do 50 miles just to get on top of my goal of 10 miles per day average. I feel like I'm still recovering a bit, so I don't think I'm going to make up for it all in one day. I will try to put in 30 miles tomorrow and then 20 miles the next 2 days. They will most likely be pretty slow miles. I want to mention a couple things from last episode. At one point, I mentioned my goal for 2019. I am not sure why my brain stepped back in time for a moment, but I'm hoping that everybody was able to figure out that I was talking about 2024 when I was talking about goals. A second adjustment from last episode is that I did find some more information on fasting insulin levels. And now I'm going to be targeting under 10 microunits per milliliter. One of the discussions I heard that helped me determine that was with Robert Lustig, who I find to be a primary source for information on metabolic health. He cautions that lab value evaluations have been tainted by the fact that the normal population is far from healthy. Fasting insulin is an example of this. While 15 microunits per milliliter is considered the high end of normal, Lustig thinks that research shows that a value over 10 shows compromised function, and people should be striving for a value of 5. Hearing this just makes me more curious about what my results are going to be out of the gate. One of the things that is a problem in many areas of my life is that I am so incompetent when it comes to anything mechanical or anything related to crafting something. For some reason, I have the hardest time conceptualizing how things fit together. I have to be very careful with anything that I'm trying to build or fix. If I'm not really careful, I make really simple mistakes. But with my bike, I want to do as much work myself as I can. So this week, I'm going to attempt to change the Future Shock spring on my Specialized Roubaix by myself. Future Shock is a specialized feature that comes on a few models. The Roubaix is an endurance bike, and the Future Shock provides a way of absorbing bumps while maintaining a rigid connection between the wheels and the frame. The Future Shock is positioned under the stem and allows for 20 millimeters of travel. I've really come to love the smooth feeling of the Future Shock. However, I am on the heavy side of what the bike was designed for, so the spring that is at the heart of the Future Shock flexes too much just simply under my body weight. The bike came with a stiffer spring, and that should work better for me. So I need to remove the stem, undo a cap that holds the spring in place, and then put it back together. This doesn't sound too bad, but I have a tendency to turn things that are easy into complicated things routinely. I will have to let you know how this goes. Final thing I will mention is that I purchased a pair of Belief leggings. I have a pair of Belief cold weather pants that are exceptional, but they are a little too warm. These new leggings are waterproof and the perfect weight for rides in cold weather with just a little rain. And this is the condition of almost every ride this time of year. If you have never checked out Belief before, it is worth going to their website. Belief is spelled B-A-L-E-A-F. One big plus for me is that the Belief supply chain is Global Recycling Standard certified. Check them out. I spent New Year's Eve with maybe the worst sore throat I've ever had. In this week's interview, you can hear that I wasn't 100%. What was 100% is how much I enjoyed talking to my guest, Anita Elder. I have been watching Anita's Instagram for a while now, and I'm so impressed with her journey. I'm just blown away by her incredible perseverance when it comes to getting healthy through cycling. She is such a vibrant member of the local cycling community, and I'm thrilled to share her story with you. Here's our conversation. I am joined today by one of the most inspirational people I have come across since joining the local bicycle community here. Happy New Year, and thank you, Anita Elder, for coming on the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Now, Anita, you are an active member of Cascade Bicycle Club and have given at least one talk in an event. You serve as an ambassador for the club as well. You post your adventures on Instagram, and you have a website that gives really great information on your journey. I think it's safe to say that you have inspired thousands of people, and I am one of those people.
Makes me feel good because that's what I've been trying to do.
Well, you're being successful at it for sure. And I'm so glad that listeners of this podcast get to hear your story. So let's start out with give me a memory you have of biking as a kid.
Well, one of my first memories, I did get a bike for Christmas when I was in second grade. I just vaguely remember it because I have a picture from that time. But the bike I remember most from my childhood was this yellow banana seat bike. I used to ride it all over town, unsupervised, and I didn't wear a helmet. Most kids didn't wear them back then. And I would also do these long 20-mile bike rides with the Girl Scout troop that I belonged to.
I remember those days of no helmets. We didn't even think about it. Our parents didn't think about it. And
Right.
those were days that they let us do a lot of fairly dangerous things. So,
Yeah, like, running around town unsupervised when you're only 7.
right, right. Now, you are very physically active now. Did you develop the desire to pursue physical activity as a teen?
A little bit. I was very active in gymnastics, and my specialty was the uneven bars. I did like some other sports, but I came from a poor background, and my mom and dad relied on me to watch my little brothers when I got out of school in the afternoon. Sometimes I'd have to cook dinner. So I didn't really pursue any other sports because it would have taken time away. It would have been a burden on them. We lived in a rural town and there was not a lot to do. So our entertainment a lot of the times was hiking through the mountains.
Now, what mountains would that have been?
That would be in Pennsylvania. So nothing like the elevation you have here in Washington. You might have 3,000 feet might have been the highest one. And we never went up that high. We were just going through mostly deer trails and swinging on monkey vines, things like that.
Right. Now, currently, you are, like I said, very active, physically active. I think that discussions we've had on other podcasts, you're not typical. You're more physically active than the typical American. And I think you're more physically active than people in our age group typically are. I think that COVID played a role in that journey about getting on a bike and being more active. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was certainly the catalyst that started my biking again. I was actually on a hiking tour down in Tasmania when I got COVID the end of February of 2020. And when I returned home, everything was shutting down and the hiking trails, everybody was wanting to get outside away from others, but the hiking trails were too crowded. And I certainly didn't want to get COVID again. So I decided to look into e-bikes. I had checked it out probably 5 years earlier, but it was just out of my price range. This time when I checked, I found Rad Power Bikes, which is based out of Seattle, but they ship everywhere. And the timing was right with the first pandemic relief check, so it pretty much paid for the majority of that bike. It was a cargo e-bike, but it got me around and got me out, and that was the start of it.
You mentioned going for the e-bike.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is a response to maybe some health challenges that you've had or some physical obstacles that you've had, but you don't let those physical obstacles slow you down. Can you talk a bit about your obstacles and then why you don't let that stop you?
Sure. So I was inactive for probably a couple of decades due to bone on bone knees. I had a lot of sports injuries while I was in the Air Force. The worst one was when I tore my ACL playing racquetball, and they never fixed it. They never did anything about it. They just kept saying, "Oh, you just sprained it." And from there, it just kept getting worse. And then I can't remember what I was doing. And then I tore the meniscus in the other knee and just it just kept getting worse. And as it got worse, I kept getting heavier, which, just it was kind of like a vicious circle. I couldn't get a lot of exercise. I've always loved the outdoors, growing up poor and spending all my time outdoors. I've done a lot of camping, a lot of hiking. I thought to myself, I could either sit and wallow in my pain or I could get outside and enjoy what I could. So most of the time I would drive to a location, walk us around as much as I could, taking photos, which is another hobby that I like to do. So I had both my knees replaced 6 years ago. And to do that, I had to jump through hoops. First, I had to be over 55, and I had to get my weight down some, as close to 200 as I could, which was hard when you're in pain. I was on insulin, which also makes it very hard to lose weight. And then the final thing was getting my insulin under control. So I really pushed on that. I guess it was 2016, that late spring, early summer, I really did a push and finally met the criteria. I was well over 55 at that point. Got my knees replaced. And once that was done, I knew it was my chance to improve my health. 2 months after my second knee was replaced, I hiked up the Rattlesnake Ledge, which, was a pretty big deal for me. I hadn't done that in a very, very long time. And then 5 months after that second knee, I did an 8-mile hike at Mount Rainier, which that, had a lot of elevation. So bit by bit, I got healthier and more active. Last February, I was taken off insulin. That made it even easier to lose weight, and I've lost about 100 pounds since my knees have been replaced. Today, I started my final push to lose that last 35, 40 pounds to reach my goal weight.
That's
So it's
fantastic.
just trying to keep a positive attitude. And, I see a lot of people in chronic pain, which I was, and they give up. I wanted to see too much of this world and do too much to just give up.
And it sounds like there was kind of a reward mechanism. I'm guessing at this. You'll have to tell me if I'm right. But when you're going out to try to capture a great picture,
Hmm.
and it seems like if you're successful at doing that, you kind of hike to a place and you get a beautiful thing. It's like a reward for putting up with the
Yeah,
pain to get out there.
yeah. I stayed an active member of the Mountaineers, primarily leading photography hikes, which were, short in nature, but it was still getting out and having fun and taking my mind off of pain and other troubles.
Now, when you were looking at getting your knees replaced, did you have a lot of confidence that that was going to be a game changer? Had you known other people that had the procedure? What was your thought process as far as what life was going to be like after the knee replacement?
Well, I do a lot of research, and I know a lot of people who have had knee replacements. Most of them had problems with after their knee replacements because, one, they either didn't keep up with the physical therapy like the doctor told them they needed to do, or they just had other reasons to not, go out and try to improve things. They just thought, oh, my knees are replaced, so things will be better, and just left it at that. They didn't try to improve what their life was. It was more like a status quo to them. So anyhow, I did a bunch of research, including watching a surgery on YouTube. And so I knew what to expect. So after they were done, I did every bit of physical therapy, where they came to my house 3 days a week for the first month. And then the second month, I went to the VA twice a month or twice a week for another month. And then from there, I just started doing more walking. And I did try an analog bike, but that was just a little bit too much in the Seattle area with the hills. And sorry to say, that thing sat in my garage after only riding it once.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, so I kind of knew that I could be better after doing all the research.
Another thing that it seems like had an influence on you is an organization. And I don't know if the organization is called this, but I think that I see the hashtag all bodies on bikes. Is that the name of an organization?
Yeah, yeah. It started by Marley Bronsky, and I can't remember the other woman's name. I happened upon a little short video of them where they got together and they rode, I guess, somewhere across Oregon to the coast, which was a big thing. It was a multi-day ride, and that interests me. And so I started checking it out more. I found she was local. In fact, one day I was outside and she happened to be riding by with her dogs, and I got the wave, and I got to meet her at a STP that I was volunteering at. And the Facebook group and her posts and stuff really encourage people that it doesn't matter what shape you are, what you look like, or how physically fit you are. If you want to ride a bike, don't let others stop you. Don't let others tell you that, oh, you're not fit enough to be riding a bike. You're too heavy, things like that. So her inspiration got me more interested in joining a bike club like Cascade. Now, I knew about Cascade because I had done some design work for them on a brochure, like probably around 2008. So, I reached out to them and joined a couple of the free group rides, which there weren't that many that first year of COVID, but I did go. And I was the only one on an e-bike at the time. And they were just so welcoming and supportive of me. I was heavier than what I am now. And like I said, I was on a cargo e-bike trying to ride with them. And it didn't have gears, but I kept up and just started to get more and more involved. Now when I go on free group rides with Cascade, there's so many e-bikes these days. So I'm really glad that they support that community as well. My first event with Cascade, I did the Lake Chelan tour, and that was on the cargo e-bike. And I didn't look like a lot of the other riders on that, but I didn't let it stop me. I didn't care if I was too slow. I just wanted to have fun. Nobody gave me any crap about being like I was, riding with them. Everybody was great. And not everybody was a Cascade member. There was people from out of state too. So they're just that nice feeling of being accepted for who I was just gave me more encouragement to do more and more with Cascade and other bike clubs around the area. So everybody in the bike community has been so supportive and encouraging. And because of that feeling, I'm now a long distance bike rider, which I never thought I would ever say that. I never thought I'd ride 100 miles at my age, but there I go. I did my STP this past year. That's back-to-back 100-milers. So these days, I try to be an inspiration for others. A lot of people, if they see me on an e-bike, if they're out walking on a trail, and they'll ask me questions, and I answer them. Or I tell other people that I see riding e-bikes, I'm like, join one of the bike clubs because they are welcoming, and you'll be surprised at how far you'll start riding.
This message of all bodies on bikes, I think that's valuable. And I think you're kind of living, when you talk about going with a group of people and you don't feel like you're getting bad looks or you're not getting comments, you're not getting judged.
No.
It seems like that's such a door opener for you to be comfortable getting out with other people, which is such a huge part of it.
Yeah.
So it's great that you're not only, that message is not only out there, but you're living the benefit from people embracing others. That's fantastic.
Yes.
There is this different pace. You talk about being a hiker, and obviously you go out and there's kind of a pace of exploring the wilderness. And to me, there's a different pace of exploring when you're on a bicycle. Does that resonate with you? How would you describe like what it's like exploring things at the pace of a bicycle?
Well, when I'm riding my bike, my mind just clears of all the junk. I'm able to really be in the moment. I can pick out the sounds around me and the smell of the environment. I see birds and animals I would miss if I was in a car. And I've discovered a lot of really nice trails, paved trails usually, that I wouldn't have hiked because to me that's just a walk. It's a little bit different than a hike. So I would have never discovered some of these really nice places if I had not gotten on a bike.
And when you talk about that, you do have this website and you have done quite a bit of traveling around on a bike. Do you think about this aspect of, this is different? I'm on a bike here and that makes it different. Do you have that thought when you're kind of out and about in a place like, did you do a trip at Niagara Falls?
I guess it was 2021. My mother-in-law and I, we did a 1 month, 16 state road trip. My family primarily is in Pennsylvania, and her only living relative lives in Lancaster. So we spent a week there, but in between, going there and coming back, we went different places, and I took my e-bike along with me. And so when we stopped at Niagara Falls, instead of walking around like the typical tourist, I did it by bike, which was such a better experience because I wasn't in the crowds and I got to really see the beauty of everything. I also rode it at the battlefields at Gettysburg, and that's a place that I explored a lot as a kid. It was cheap entertainment, so we would go there and check out the sights all the time, but usually by car. So seeing it but from a bike perspective, it was amazing. It was you could get a better feel for what it felt like being a soldier back then and in the war. My current car I bought right before that road trip, and the biggest selling point was it already had a hitch. All I had to do was slap my bike rack onto it. I didn't have to get everything reinstalled.
That's great. You've mentioned Cascade Bicycle Club a couple times, and you've described it as your tribe. I think I saw in one post. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, that you've kind of found a tribe?
I have made so many friends in the bike community, mostly from Cascade. And it's not just from riding events. I volunteer a lot there. And so I've really gotten to know all the staff, and I start seeing other volunteers. So I've gotten to know them. And then you start seeing the same riders all the time. And it's like if I want to go for a bike ride, I don't want to go by myself. I just post on the Facebook group and say, hey, anybody want to ride with me? And there's usually somebody. I may not have never met them, but we're both having fun on a bike. And I think that's great, just having friends that you can go do things with at spur of the moment.
That's awesome. You had reached out to me. I don't know if you remember that, but it invited me to do, I think it's Reach the Beach.
Uh-huh.
And I had something going on that week, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like, oh man, that's pretty awesome. So I think I'm going to try to do Reach the Beach this year. But
Oh, I
yeah.
plan on volunteering as a photographer for them this year.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Well, I'll try to wear something snazzy or something. So good for pictures. I don't know.
Well, I know if you raise, I think it's $250, maybe it's more, you get a free jersey.
Okay. Well, that's a good goal.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you like about Cascade Bicycle Club? Listeners of this podcast are from all over, and I like Cascade a lot. I've done different episodes highlighting Cascade. I'd like to have some things about Cascade that maybe other people with bike clubs in other areas can look at. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you like about Cascade, kind of as an organization, the people, whatever, that draws you to that organization.
Well, besides being very welcoming of everybody, and they also, they do the free group rides and they have a lot of events during the year. But what a lot of people don't know is, hey, if you volunteer, you get volunteer hours, and you could use those hours to register free for one of the events that you want to ride. So that's very cool. But Cascade also does a lot of other stuff beside these events and free group rides. They are educating our children. They're going into the schools and teaching them how to ride safely with helmets. They take teens actually out on rides. So they do a lot with the community. They were originally just focusing on schools in the Seattle area, but now it's spread across the state. I can't remember how many places, but it's a lot now. They do other things like the pedaling relief program, which started during the pandemic. And then on Sundays, which I usually volunteer for, is we take trailers and we go to the PCC in Ballard and Fremont. We rescue food that they have to get rid of because new stuff has come in. And we ride that food the whole way down below Soto to a pop-up food bank that really serves a population that doesn't have access to a normal food bank. So, just all those things, they really work with the community, and I just feel like I fit there.
As you're talking, what I'm thinking is that there's two sides of Cascade. One is that they do great events that you can participate and enjoy, but there's also this opportunity to give back to the community that they
Yes.
facilitate. So I think that's
Yeah.
wonderful. you served as an ambassador for Seattle to Portland, right? And
Hmm.
I'm wondering what that is like to be an ambassador.
Well, it's really not too different from what I'm already doing because I'm already talking up the club and different events to others. For instance, I was volunteering, I can't remember which event, but not all of the riders, like I said, or not all of them are members. Some come from out of state. And when you're at these rest stops and you get to talking to them, it's like, by the way, did you know about this event? Or did you know Cascade does this? And so, they're very interested. And so I could spread the word that way. I also, I could let them know about volunteer opportunities and the other things that Cascade does. And so really the only difference about being an ambassador is I post more social media about it.
Do you have people reaching out to you and asking questions as an ambassador?
Sometimes, yep. Now for STP, not only was I an ambassador, but I happen to be the number one bib, which I earned from being one of the top volunteers of the year for 2022. So a lot of the riders, they have this little game that they play to kind of take their mind off the distance. They try to see who can find the lowest bib number. So a lot of people did stop me wanting a picture as proof that they found the lowest number. And then, they asked me how I got it. And that really opens up a door to say, hey, you can always volunteer and ride for free next time, things like that.
Isn't that fantastic? I mean, to
Yeah.
me, that says a lot about Cascade events. It's
Yeah.
not the fastest rider that's
No.
getting the number one bib. It's someone who is contributing in a great
Yeah.
way to keep the community going. That's awesome. You did something that I thought was really fun, and you made an ambassador flag.
Yeah, it was technically a bandana,
Okay.
but I sewed up the one side and put it on a stick and attached it to the bike. So it was a flag hanging off my bike. And then I also rode the STP with a tutu and a unicorn horn. And that was to support the Trevor Project. I have a grandchild who is transgendered and lives in Texas, which I don't even want to get into that. Also, a friend, his daughter was transgendered and committed suicide. And him and his wife were riding with unicorn horns and tutus. And we were doing it to show support for that group.
I'm so glad you said that because I had noticed the tutus and the unicorn horns, and I didn't know until just now what that was. So that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Fantastic. What are some of your favorite ride experiences? You've been on a number of them. Can you kind of rank them, or is it possible to talk about?
Oh God, it's hard to rank them. I mean, I love riding up in BC. I've done 3 events up there and then some riding on my own, but I did Tour the Victoria, which is very, very hilly and has almost as many people as STP participate in that. And it was fun because I went with a friend and we took our bikes on the Victoria Clipper and went up and made a weekend of it.
Just for people that don't know, the Victoria Clipper is like a fast ferry.
Yes. Another one that I did up there was the Apple Valley Grand Fondo around Fort Langley. That was very pretty, and the whole community comes out and cheers you on. And then I went to Cranbrook and did the Kootenai Grand Fondo that had me into some mountains that I had never explored. And after that, I drove up the Banff and did some of my own riding. But the nice thing about events in BC is that at all the intersections on the route, there's people stopping traffic. So you don't have to, constantly, stop and look to make sure nothing's coming like a lot of the stuff here in Washington. I don't know. They just have I think, a better system. But I really love going down the Tour de Palm Springs last February. The Tour de Palm Springs is a fundraiser for first responders and military and retirees. Retired military, I should say. The whole community turns out. You have marching bands and cheerleaders at the beginning and the finish. But then each food stop, you have different high school bands playing. I can't really eat a big breakfast before I start riding. I just can't eat that early. So at mile 20, at that food stop, oh, it was the best breakfast I could have thought of that at that moment. But they had homemade mini chicken tamales, and oh my God, that they really did it well with food the whole ride. And then at the end, they had like a big party type thing with more food and beer and drawings for bike and bike gear. And anyhow, we had a lot of fun in that. And the STP was really fun, but it was like a bit of a blur. So, I am going to do it again. I did get very emotional when I crossed the finish line, and I ended up crying on Lee Lambert's shoulder. He's the executive director for Cascade. So it really meant a lot that he was waiting for me to cross. Yeah, I got very emotional, started crying.
Well, that's really cool. And if you're okay, I'd like to explore that a little bit because
Sure.
when I finished the STP, I think we are similar in this way that I didn't think I would ever do the STP. I had wanted to do it when I was younger, but I felt like those days were past. I'm not going to ride 100 miles, 2 days in a row. And my wife and my daughter I had ridden with my son-in-law. So my wife and my daughter were at the finish line. As they were congratulating me, I got emotional. It surprised me. It was very meaningful. And so, can you talk a bit about the deep meaning of that for you?
Well, it was very unexpected. I did not think that I would feel that way because I had done some other milestones. I can remember about a decade ago, a friend, her husband, who had been overweight and then started biking and lost weight, and he did the STP. And I thought, oh my God, he's crazy. Who would want to ride 100 miles on a bike? And so for me to do it for the first time and then do it 2 days in a row at that, I don't know. I guess it just really got to me. And like I said, having Lee actually waiting for me, somebody I really knew, it just made me break down. I'm a pretty emotional person anyhow, but yeah, I wasn't expecting that level of emotion when I crossed.
I think that's cool that there's someone there recognizing, what you just did. So good. Good
Yeah.
for
Well,
Lee.
there's something I did after STP, just like a couple weeks after, that was another milestone for me. And I also got emotional on that. And I had some friends join me. And that was the Girlfriends Triathlon. I had never done a triathlon in my life. And this was a sprint triathlon. So it started with a half a mile swim, a 12-mile bike ride, and then a 5K run. And, my timing sucked. I was like in the bottom 20% of finishers, but I finished. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm 64 and I did a triathlon for the first time. How cool is that?
That is
Like,
so cool. I want to know though, how does that come about? Did you
again, I can thank Marley and All Bodies on Bikes. I was listening to their podcast, and one of their guests was talking about the Girlfriends Triathlon. And I thought, well, you know what? These ladies are not your typical athlete. And if they can do it, I'm going to try it. And I don't care what my time is. As long as I finish, that's fine. And I'll tell you, when I went there, there were other women there. They asked me if it was my first time, and they had done it a couple times, and they just like embraced me like a sister and, took me under their wing, telling me, what the procedures were and everything. But I would have never done it if I had not listened to that podcast.
now you did not use an e-bike on that event.
No, no, I used a regular analog bike. I had found one that I could afford through Facebook Marketplace. And as soon as I went to look at the bike, I got on and rode it, and it was just like perfect fit, perfect comfort, good saddle. I primarily bought it just for the triathlon. I kept it a little bit after that, but my e-bike has me spoiled because I can ride farther and I'm not that interested in just, riding down the street on a bike. I want to go out and explore. And on an analog bike, and with these hills in Seattle, I just can't do that.
There's spiking, swimming, and running. I'm
Hmm.
wondering which one of those was the most difficult for you in the triathlon.
The running. I've always hated the run. As a kid, I could run short distances very fast and I could win races, but anything long, like I can remember we would have to run 4 laps around the football field for gym class twice a week, and I hated it. So I knew that was going to be the worst part of it. And I did end up walking a lot of that 5K. So, but I wasn't the only one. It was over 90 degrees by that point, and it was just too hot to do too much more exertion after the swimming and the bike riding. The bike riding was the easiest part.
I was thinking so. Congratulations on that. Can you talk about your participation in charitable bike events? Do they bring another level of participation for you? You know, there's things like the Great Cycle Challenge, which is something that I also do, Tour de Cure. Can you encapsulate if those things add something special to a ride?
Well, I usually pick charities that I have a connection with, for starters. But before I talk about riding bike events for charities, I'm going to back up a little to how I was raised. My mom, she always believed in charity work. So as a kid, she was always dragging us along places to volunteer. Before doing any charity bike events, I had volunteered at the Woodland Park Zoo. I still volunteer for Meals on Wheels. Of course, I do a lot of volunteering for Cascade, including some graphic design work. And I do pro bono graphic design work for other charities. So it's natural that I get involved in more charity events, things that are going to support what connects to me. So, for instance, I'm diabetic. So, Tour de Cure was a perfect choice because that is run by the American Diabetes Association. And this coming year, it'll be the third time that I ride. When you have diabetes and you participate in Tour de Cure, you're considered a red rider. So, any of the money that I raise, it's helping others like me. And there have been a lot of advances in diabetic medicine since my grandfather died from diabetic complications in 58. I never met him. And I have my dad's diabetic, and a lot of his siblings were diabetic. So, it runs in our family. And so that one's very important to me. In 2022, I rode a Blitzer ride and helped raise money because a dear friend had just died of cancer. And so I wanted to, acknowledge that. And I rode in her name. And then Reach the Beach, I've done twice. And I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be volunteering for them this year. And they're important because lung disease, which, the American Lung Association sponsors this, but lung disease has touched me as well. My dad has COPD. His wife had died of lung cancer a little over 10 years ago. I have, my maternal grandfather had lung disease. And then one of my friends ended up, he wasn't even a smoker, but he ended up getting some lung cancer and got one lung removed. So, that's why I've supported those organizations. And then this coming year, I usually try to do 2 charity events a year. So I'm doing Tour de Cure again. But this year, I also plan to do Bike MS because another friend has MS, and she's been out there participating in those events as a walker. But this year, she is going to ride a bike, which she hasn't really done. So I'm hoping to be there to support her while she rides, riding beside her.
That just sounds so wonderful. I mean, again, it's a different layer to the experience.
Yeah, it really is because, you're really trying to support these organizations because they're important.
I'll look forward to seeing your posts on that event.
Yeah, by the way, the friend who died from cancer, I ride with a little thing of her ashes on my keychain. Every time I ride my bike, she's with me.
That's sweet.
So, yeah, it's always there.
You were featured in Bicycling Magazine, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that.
Yeah, when they reached out to me, I was really surprised. I was like, me? Why me? It's nothing that I really did that was, that made them choose me. It's just they like to feature members of their organization whenever they can. And so they asked me if I would like to, be featured in there. It was a 1-page thing where they asked a bunch of questions that they provided those questions ahead of time. I could fill it out and send it in. What really pleased me is that media like Bicycling Magazine, they're starting to realize that bike riders come in many shapes and sizes and ride different kinds of bikes. So I felt like it was my responsibility to represent e-bikes and heavier riders to help inspire them to get out and ride a bike or do whatever just to get more active. So I think the more people like me that are in a national magazine, the more people are going to take notice and feel like, hey, I can belong too. Recently, I was also mentioned in the latest Adventure Cyclist magazine, which is another national one. So I guess I've had 5 minutes of fame for the past year. I don't have like a huge following on social media like other cyclists. Just being in these magazines, and when somebody does notice one of my social media posts, I feel like, hey, somebody noticed, and what I said must have meant something. Because after I was in that bicycling magazine, I did have a couple people reach out that I didn't know them, but they said, hey, I saw you in this magazine. And they would ask me some questions and stuff. And they said that I inspired them, which I was like, yay. It's
Well,
like, if I can do it, anybody can.
you said that you didn't really do anything to like warrant being interviewed by Bicycle Magazine, but that's not true. You have lived a great journey. I mean, you've lived an incredible journey and you've overcome. And I think that it's an acknowledgement that you're doing something that is an inspiration and that a lot of people need to do. I think a lot of people need to make the decision to overcome adversity and do what you're doing.
One of the things I'm trying to get better at is accepting compliments. It's really easy for women to kind of make excuses, I guess, for whenever somebody pays them a compliment, they usually will try to say something negative about themselves. And I've been trying to really work on that. So if I
Fantastic.
get silent, it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I feel embarrassed.
Well, I'm going to make it part of my life mission to give you compliments whenever I talk to you and give you
Thank
practice.
you.
You have mentioned your rad bike,
Mhm.
and first, they are a local company, and I'm wondering if you went down there and jumped on a bike when you were getting to know rad bike. Did you do a test ride?
No, I didn't. It was right when things shut down during the pandemic, so I couldn't have gone in if I wanted to. And I went online and was just looking at bikes, and I ordered it sight unseen. They had a mobile service at that time, so they put it together and delivered it to my door. I didn't have to go pick it up. But I mainly went with them, not just because they were local, but they were about half the price of the other e-bikes that I was looking at. So I started off with the Rad Runner, which was a cargo e-bike, and I still laugh at myself because I was probably the only cargo bike that has ever ridden the 3-day Lake Chelan tour. I made it up the hills and everything. And I had that for a little over a year. And I decided, since I was riding longer distances and in more events, I wanted a bike that looked more like our analog bike. And so I went with the Rad Mission, which they had stopped making, much to my disappointment. Again, it doesn't have gears, but it looks a lot more like an analog bike and it's more agile. It's a bit lighter. My runner was like 65 pounds without the batteries on, and the Mission is 42 without the batteries. So a big difference. The only plus side of that Rad Runner being so heavy is I really built up my arm strength because when I first got it, I could not load it on my bike rack by myself. And after a while, I was able to do it. And so the Mission being a lot lighter, man, it's easy to get up on my bike rack. But
It's an awesome side effect.
the other downside of having the Mission, without any gears, there are some steep hills that are impossible to climb. For instance, ride for Major Taylor this past spring. I was okay with all the hills except for there was this one in around Des Moines, I think, that was 18% grade over half a mile. I got halfway up and had to walk the rest, but I would say over 60% of all bike riders were walking up that hill. It was tough. I wish that, they would make a Mission that had at least some gears. Oh,
walking an e-bike up a hill, that's
oh, it's not fun. It's heavy. It's heavy. Now, because it doesn't have gears, it does have a throttle. And so you can actually throttle it a little to help push it up the hill. So that's better than nothing. And a lot of people think, well, if it doesn't have gears and you got a throttle, you're not really getting any exercise. That may be true of some e-bike riders who do class two, which is what my mission is as a class two e-bike. And when I see these, usually it's dudes. They're out there riding these class two e-bikes and they're just throttling. They're not pedaling at all. To me, why didn't you just get a scooter if that's what you wanted to do? When I'm riding my bike, the only time I use my throttle is going up hills. Otherwise, I'm in either no assist or the lowest setting. My dream bike, the one that I just can't afford, is the Specialized Turbo Creo. It's half the weight of my current e-bike. I think it's like 28 pounds. It has gears, has a range between 80 to 120 miles, depending if you add the battery extender. But it's like 6 times what I paid for the mission. So, it's kind of out of my price range for a while. The other drawback is I'm short and need a small frame, and they're very, very hard to find.
So if anybody from Specialized is hearing this, if you want to have your Rio bike put to really good use, you can just send Anita a new bike. Living in the Seattle area, it makes a big difference having that pedal assist. And I'm wondering if you can talk about, has it made all the difference? Do you think if you didn't have that, you would have struggled really to get out as much as you have?
I think I would have stuck more with the hiking instead of the biking, and because I get altitude sickness, I can't hike up to some of the places that I really wanted to hike to. But yeah, I had an analog bike after my knees were replaced, but with the hills, it was just too challenging for me, and it wasn't fun. It was like, okay, I'm exercising just because I need to exercise, not because, oh, I'm really having fun doing this. An e-bike has really made it a lot of fun for me. And I've been able to go longer distances and ride more than if I ever had I think I had an analog bike when I was in the military station in Germany, getting back and forth to work. And that's really the most I rode a bike before now, distance wise.
Well, that's a major difference. I mean, to enjoy it,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why do something if you don't enjoy it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like running. I know I'm not ever going to do a triathlon again because I hated running.
Okay. At one point, you had a bike crash, and I think it was a somewhat serious bike crash. Did you question getting back on the bike again after that?
Not at all. Not at all. So it was a bad crash that it left me with a concussion. I had deviated septum, a cracked maxillary bone above my teeth. Several of my teeth have hairline fractures now. I had a big hematoma and stitches in my forehead, bruised ribs, and massive road rash that left me with some bad scarring on my face. If I was younger and had the money, I'd probably have some cosmetic work done. But after the accident, it's like my mom said or asked me, she goes, "What would you have done if you had died?" I'm like, well, it would have sucked for everybody else, but for me, that's the way I want to go. I didn't know nothing and I was having fun. So, a couple weeks after my accident, I was back doing some free group rides. And then I think 3 weeks after the accident, I did Tour the Lavender and did my first metric century.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah. So it did leave me a little bit cherry going down hills these days. Like if there's a downhill and I can see way far ahead and it's straight, then I'm gonna kind of let loose and go fast. But if it's got turns in it, or it has a stop sign at the bottom, or I can't really see where the road's going, then I'm braking a lot. I go through brake pads a lot. But other than that, that's about the only change in my riding habits. That and getting a better fitting helmet.
I think I know the answer to this question, but do you feel like you gained a lot of physical vitality at your age because of biking?
Oh, most definitely. One thing, I used to get monthly massages and I had the same massage therapist for like 15 years. And before I started biking, she was telling me that I had lost a lot of muscle tone, just about all my muscle tone in my legs. And since then, I've built back up, and she could tell which areas I needed to focus on. And the biking has really, really helped with that. I don't get out of breath when I climb stairs anymore. As I mentioned earlier, my arms are stronger because I can lift things heavier now. When I first started riding my e-bike, I would have to put it in assistance level or two or three on flat surfaces. And these days, I'm riding in 0 or 1 assist, except for hills. And that also has the advantage of having a longer battery range. But I just feel healthier. My doctor at the VA says that I'm like the poster child of how life can improve if you are proactive with your health.
Fantastic.
And biking has contributed a lot to that.
And it sounds like you've reversed some of your insulin sensitivity. Are you type 2 diabetic? Is that right?
Yes, I'm type 2.
So it sounds like you've seen some gains as far as your insulin sensitivity as well.
Yeah, I'm off insulin, and my A1C has been at gold for the past year, and I don't have really bad highs or lows anymore. I just feel so much better.
And what about emotional well-being? Has that been impacted as well?
Most definitely. It's like when I get stressed or upset these days, my first thing to do is hop on the bike and go for a ride, because it just really clears my head of all the crap, and it kind of resets me so that I can face whatever challenges come up. But yeah, it's one of the best things for mental health, in my opinion.
I agree, for sure. You are a graphic designer, and
Mhm.
so you think about design and colors and layout and all that stuff. So I want to get your professional perspective on something. Can you talk about what makes an artfully designed jersey, in your opinion?
Well, I don't like boring jerseys that are just like a color with a logo slapped on. I like things that have a lot of bright colors and has a theme, more or less. For instance, I didn't ride RSVP this past year. I volunteered for it, but their anniversary jersey was just so cool looking, because it was an anniversary thing, and it used not only the U.S. colors of red, white, and blue, but Canada has red and white, so those were the main colors. And I don't know, they were just very striking. I really, really liked it. The other one that I really liked from this year was right around Washington. They've gone more to a tour light model instead of spending a week just riding in one area. They're doing like 4 mini tours, like 3-day tours in different areas of the state. And so this year, the jersey, it had Washington State on the back, and it had like dots of all the places that we were having tours. And I know we're only doing 4 for 2024. 2023, I think we did 6. But like I said, they had the map on the back, and then on the front, I think it said right around Washington. And the colors, well, they weren't like bright. It wasn't a solid color. It was a mix of colors. I'm trying to remember what the front of it looked like, but I don't know. I like those. Some of my least favorite ones, the CDA Fondo, that's the Coeur d'Alene Fondo. I rode that 2 years ago, and it has like maybe 3 colors in the logo, but it's very plain looking. But it's in the stash with, I've outgrown, I've gotten smaller, so I have a lot of really large event jerseys now that I've been stacking up, and I'm going to save them and make a quilt out of them.
I I think making a quilt out of cycling jerseys that are too big for you because you've achieved some goals, that's like, I don't know, that's like a trophy, you know?
Yeah, that's how I'm looking at it. It's not just gonna be jerseys, because sometimes at the events, you get a free T-shirt. So I have a lot of really large T-shirts that I'm gonna kind of combine them.
Now, the ride around Washington, is that a Cascade thing?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry, it is a Cascade thing.
I talked to Paul Tomei
Uh-huh.
December 14th on the podcast. And so we go through all of the 2024 tours. So if anybody's
Mhm.
interested in checking that out, I would recommend it. We did that episode. I want to do it as early as possible so that people could plan.
Yeah, those tours are fun because you're based in one spot, and each day you're on a different route to explore a different area. And then the first 2 days in the evening, we kind of get together for a social. You have a SAG driver, and you also have rest stops with food and lunch, things like that. But nobody's dragging your gear around. You can leave that wherever you're staying. And when I did the Winthrop one, and I've been doing this more because of finances, I camp. I usually will find a campsite that has power for like an RV site, pitch my tent, and then I can recharge my batteries overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did for Winthrop this year.
Fantastic. You've achieved a lot, obviously, and some things that you looked at as big challenges like STP and other things. What are you looking forward to next? What's something that you still want to achieve?
Well, I'm really looking forward to June. My husband and I are going to be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this year. We're doing a tour in June. It's going to be an 8-day e-bike tour of Croatia, Montenegro, and Bosnia. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I also plan on riding both the STP and the RSVP this year. I guess the other thing I'm looking forward to, formally, it's not going to be a Cascade-led thing, but I've asked some people on I belong to a group on Facebook called the PNW Cycling Sisters, and that includes like Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. And I say, hey, anybody want to do a one-night bike packing tryout with me? It's not so much where we're going out in the wilderness, but we're going to ride from Seattle down to my in-laws in Lakewood, which is about 65 miles. Camp, we are going to take our tent and our sleeping bag, and we're going to camp overnight. My in-laws are going to feed us dinner and breakfast, and then we'll ride back. So it's a double metric century,
Nice.
right? Before, things heat up for like flying wheels and some of the other longer events that Cascade does.
That sounds awesome. If people want to follow your journey, how would they do that?
Well, on my website is anitaelder.com, or on Instagram, it's See Anita Adventures. And C is SEA for Seattle, Anita Adventures.
And I'll put a link to both of those in the show notes so it's easy for you to find them.
Yeah.
Anita, thank you so much for sharing with me, for being willing to do this. Again, I think you've inspired thousands. I think you will inspire thousands more. I look forward to talking to you in person one of these days, one of these events, if I can catch you. And just look forward to following what you're doing, and just so appreciative with all that you do to inspire people, and also your volunteer work for Cascade.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, and Happy New Year. We'll see you later.
Yep. Happy New Year to you too. I'm hoping 2024 is a good one. We need it.
That's right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
It is awesome to me that Anita just keeps rolling along no matter what. It is so impressive the work she has put in to achieve such great results and accomplish all that she has accomplished, and with 2 artificial knees on top of everything. Her story is one that really illustrates the benefit of having the e-bike as an option. It allowed her to progressively dial up the resistance as she got stronger. For many reasons, she is such an inspiration to me. I put a few links in the episode notes. Anita's website and Instagram are there. Also, you can find links to a couple of jerseys she mentioned. And finally, there is a link to the outfit that Anita wore for Seattle to Portland. I hope your year has started better than mine, and you're already making progress towards your 2024 goals. At least, we have started moving towards longer days here in the Northern Hemisphere. May the new year be filled with new friends and new routes, and maybe even some new toys. And remember, age is just a gear change.